Okay, welcome back everyone. We're back into part 7 now, and we're going to go through the second task on the list. Once again, please feel free to pause the video, have a go at the task yourself if you want to, and then we'll go through it in the way that I would do it myself. So let's head on in to SSMS. Alrighty, task 2 then. All we need to do is to link in the invoice IDs and the invoice line IDs to show the sales for 2016. So that's all based on task 1. So all we need to do is, using the mouse, copy our data there, Control C, and then Control V, paste it on in there. So we've done most of the work already, which is great. Now remember as well, you can always go up here and you can save your query itself. As you can see, the little star there means it's not saved. Or you can simply do Control S and save your query. Save as to check which folder you've saved it to. That's in your file. Save as, and you'll be able to see where you've saved your statement to in order to retrieve it going forward. Then of course just simply go and open, find your file and open it straight up. And you'll especially find if the warehouse manager keeps coming back to you saying, oh, can you add this bit of data in, can you add that bit of data in, you don't want to be typing this out all the time. So make sure you save your select statements or your queries if you find that you're probably going to be using those repeatedly in the future. Anyway, we've got our statement there, we've copied and pasted there, and all we need to do is bring in the invoice IDs and the invoice line IDs to show the sales in the same year. So looking at our tables here, we can see that we've got a sales invoices table and an invoice lines table. So looks like we'll need to bring those two in. So let's have a go at that. Now, if you remember from previous videos, we know that in 2016 not all of the orders were actually invoiced. So we need to make sure that we do a left join on the invoicing tables, because we want to show all the order IDs and any invoice IDs that are linked to them, bearing in mind that some orders haven't shipped, so they will not have any lines to match up to in the invoice table. So we use the left join to make sure we still retain all our orders, but we bring in any matching invoices themselves. So let's go for the invoices table. We're going to call that I, and we're going to join it on the order ID column in the invoices table. Again, that's like the header, which just has invoicing details, equals, going to match it to our orders, again on the order ID. So as you can see, there's quite a few tables linking on the order ID, which makes our lives quite easy when we want to join them up. So that'll just pull out all our invoices, and we've been asked for the invoice IDs. So we'll put that first one in, invoice ID. So we've got that one in now, and the next one we're asked to do is put in the invoice line IDs. Now obviously those line IDs are within the invoicing table itself, and if we look at that table quickly, you can see that it doesn't have an order ID, but what it does have is an invoice ID. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to join, again we'll keep with the left join, in this situation, invoice lines as, we'll just call this one N on n.invoice ID equals I.invoice ID. And so you see, as we start to bring in more joins, things get a little bit more complicated. Obviously, all these tables, invoices, customers and lines, join onto the orders table, so that's kind of like a central hub for joining into. But our orders lines table doesn't join on the order ID, so we have to link it to the invoices table using the invoice ID. So once again, it's all about knowing your database, knowing your key queries, and how all the data works together. So let's bring all our invoice line IDs in. And there you have it. Let's run off these results and see what we get. And as you can see, everything's joined up, but we've got a bit of a problem here. Originally, when we ran off this query at the top, let's run that off, we ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4 order lines for that specific order ID. But now that we've run this one off, as you can see, we've got a lot more than 4. There's the 4. Keeps on going down, 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 down. And there you go, 16 rows. As you can see, we seem to have what looks like duplicate order lines happening all over the place. So what is going on here? Seems to be something very strange going on, and we're not quite sure why we're getting the data like this. Now the reason is, as you can see, that there's 4 order lines for each order, and there's also 4 invoice lines for each invoice. So we've ended up with 16, which is 4 times 4. So somehow each order is duplicating 4 lines. So these order line IDs are being repeated 4 times for each order ID. And we know that there's something weird going on with this join. So let's have a little look again to see what's going on there. What we now have to do, because of this, is we need to find some other way of joining these invoice lines correctly to the other tables. Now, as you can see, things are getting pretty complex now. So what we can do is we can add an additional join line for this table here. Let me comment that out quickly. I'll comment that out. And what we'll do is we'll first find out where the error is occurring. So we know our original query produced 4 rows for this order ID. Let's execute that. As you can see, we've got 4 rows there. 1 single invoice ID. So we know that the error is not in that join with the invoices table, but we know that it's with this join here. So what we need to do is join some additional IDs onto each other. So we know as well that the invoice have an invoice line ID, so invoices lines, and we know that our order lines have an order line ID. So maybe we could join those two together. Let's give that a try. So what we're saying is during this left join we're actually making sure that there's two things to join it on. So let's have a look at that. Let's run that off and see what happens. We've got a null, so there's some weird things going on there. Still, it's not joining properly. So why isn't it joining properly? Well, let's have a very quick look at the order IDs from these sales order lines. From sales order lines, what we just want is the order line IDs. Where the order ID equals, and we're just going to have a look at the first one. Execute that. There you can see these are our order line IDs, and there's only 4 of them for that order, which is what we expect. Now if we have a look at the same order for these order lines, and remembering order lines doesn't have an order ID, so we have to join the invoices table together. We can copy that there. Where the order ID equals that number there. Let's have a quick look at those two. Here's our order ID. In fact, let's get our invoice line ID. As you can see, they're very different values, so we can't really link those two together. They're completely different. So how are we going to make sure that we bring in the right order line ID? Well, what else can we join on? Going down, we've got a description there, invoice lines. Do we have the same in our order lines? Yes, we do. So obviously the description should match in theory, because it won't change from the moment it's ordered to the point it's invoiced. So let's try that now. And see what we get on that additional join within that left join. There you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've only got one invoice line ID against each row within the order. Now I know that that may have gone a little bit over your head, but the main thing to take from that is that sometimes it's not that straightforward, just joining a whole load of tables together. Again, you'll need to build up your experience on the database and on the SQL coding in order to work your way through these problems themselves and make sure you get the results that you expect to see. And always, 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 before you send any data onto a person asking for an extract, just do a quick sanity check before you send it off. Because remember when we first looked at this, and it didn't have this join in here, this additional part of the join, then it gave some very strange results that we could see straight away. But at the end of it, we've built on task 1, and we've returned the invoice IDs and the invoice line IDs for each row in that order, and for all the orders in 2016. And that wraps up task number 2, a little bit more complex, but again you can see where strange things may happen in your return data if your joins go a little bit squiff. So that's the end of the second task that we had to fulfill. As you can see, it can get quite complicated with your joins, and you learned a new little trick today where you can join on 2 columns within your tables, joining 2 tables together with 2 different columns to hopefully avoid errors going forwards. Now that is some pretty complex coding that we're moving into, but it was just mainly an example to show you how things can go a little bit strange when you join tables together and they don't join quite as well as you expected them to do. That wraps up the second task then. So join me for task 3 and we'll keep going through the examples.